13 coffins draping the American flag and bearing the remains of U.S. troops killed in last week's suicide attack in Kabul returned home this weekend, marking the tragic final chapter in America's war in Afghanistan. With less than 24 hours remaining before the deadline for U.S. evacuation, Americans are left to wonder about the fate of those left behind and who, if anyone, will be held accountable for the mess. Friends, it's time for Hold the Line. Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. The Biden administration promised that there would be reprisals against those who are responsible for that heinous suicide attack at Kabul airport last week. And they've already taken action. CBS News headline here was that U.S. airstrike took out ISIS-K vehicle packed with explosives in Kabul. So here we have the Biden administration in the final hours as the clock continues to tick. The final hours of U.S. presence in Afghanistan, with a military presence, I should say, taking kinetic action against what would have been a suicide bombing attack again against the airport. The Biden administration also had a drone strike that it ordered in eastern Afghanistan on two individuals that it said were behind the first major terror attack. Those names have not yet been released, and some are questioning how it would be possible that the Biden team would, one, already know with any certainty who planned the terror attack of last week, and two, that they'd be able to find them this quickly and strike them so precisely. But there was also, in the attack on the vehicle, the U.S. strike against the vehicle that was on its way to Kabul airport, there were civilian casualties. About 10 have been reported, including children. Here is the Pentagon spokesman, Kirby, saying that they're going to be honest about civilian loss of life.
When we know that we have caused innocent life to be lost in the conduct of our operations, we're transparent about it. We're investigating this. I'm not going to get ahead of it. But if we have, verifiable information that we did in fact take innocent life here, then we'll be transparent about that too. Nobody wants to see that happen.
This continues on here, and we're even starting to hear that the last flights of refugees and American civilians have already left Kabul airport before Taliban control takes over. So this is at the very end of it, and it is highly likely that there are still Americans, as I speak to you now, who have been left behind in Afghanistan. The Biden administration has said sometimes that everyone who wants to get out will. I think we all know that it's almost inconceivable that any Americans, given the Taliban's reputation and ferocity, would want to stay behind in that country and be left to their mercy. So it's very likely that some form of evacuation operations are going to have to continue even after this. Here is Secretary of State Blinken talking about Americans who may be left behind and what's going to happen with them.
You may have seen that just yesterday, a very senior Taliban official went on television and radio across the country and repeatedly assured people in Afghanistan that they would have the freedom to travel after August 31st. He even specifically said those who worked for the Americans and those who want to leave for whatever reason will have that freedom. Now, of course, we don't take the Taliban at their word. We take them by their deed, and that's what we're going to be looking to. We have more than 100 countries, 114 countries, who signed on to a statement we initiated making clear the international community expects the Taliban to make good on a commitment to let people continue to leave the country after August 31st. That freedom of travel is essential to the international community's expectations of the Taliban going forward.
They are trusting in the Taliban. They have no choice, you see. They're going to ask, they're going to beg, plead, coerce, trade up, whatever they've got to do, because the Taliban controls Afghanistan now, and we are out. We are leaving, basically have already left at this point. So the Taliban is going to be with the responsibility of letting Americans, this is where we are, letting Americans leave the country under the current circumstances. That's what we're facing now, as well as all these Afghans who worked with U.S. military, Afghan SIV recipients, and others who have been left behind. The Biden administration, to be very clear, is about to leave people behind on the battlefield of Afghanistan. They're going to leave civilians behind. They're going to leave some of our fellow combatants who worked with U.S. military as Afghans. They are going to be stuck in this country, and it will just have to be a function of their own ability to stay ahead of the Taliban tormentors to see if they can actually get out of the country in one piece. When Joe Biden is pressed on this issue, here's the kind of attitude that he takes.
I'm not supposed to take any questions, but go ahead.
Mr. President, on Afghanistan,
I'm not going to answer Afghanistan now.
can you get facilities
Okay.
Not gonna deal with it. They're going to be telling you in a few weeks' time, "Oh, we did a great job. We did a great job." In fact, if you remember, just last week, they were saying that it was going pretty well before the suicide bombing attack happened. ABC's Jonathan Karl even said recently the Biden administration was trying to say the withdrawal wasn't really botched.
They're listening to President Biden and his top national security advisors before the horrible bombing. They were making this sound like a smashing success, but you heard what Secretary Blinken just said.
Yeah, I mean, it is, they've been describing something that isn't reality. This has been an incredible airlift, more than 100,000 people evacuated, but what a disaster. Clearly, Thursday was the worst day of the Biden presidency.
It is a disaster. That much is clear. We lost 13 American servicemen and women to a suicide bombing attack all in one day during this botched withdrawal situation. And before they can rewrite the history of this, before the Biden administration and all of their little scribes in the Democrat-aligned corporate media can go to work trying to convince people, just in time for the midterm elections, of course, next year, that this wasn't quite as bad as people thought, it wasn't quite as chaotic. I mean, even some liberal journos out there right now are willing to admit that, no, this was a disaster. Here's a PBS journalist, Jane Ferguson, saying to say this was chaotic was an understatement.
And of course, then we also saw panicked crowds. So the soldiers, when we talk about security, at the time, much of the discussion of security was how to keep the soldiers, but also the people safe from the panicked crowds, from stampedes, from the heat. There were people lost to the stampedes and killed right there in the street. So to say it was chaotic is an understatement. To say that there was a semblance of security checks is a misunderstanding of what was actually happening.
You heard Tony Blinken say, oh, look, it's just like an embassy. Not like an embassy.
Not like an embassy. It's like a stampede of people trying to be controlled by various armed groups.
Yeah, that's what the withdrawal plan devolved into very rapidly. That and, of course, a massive suicide bombing that killed hundreds of Afghans and 13 U.S. soldiers, U.S. troops, I should say. So we'll continue to follow this very closely. President Biden's handling of the evacuation from Afghanistan has led to a dramatic decline in his poll numbers. Senior fellow at the American Conservative Union, Mercedes Schlapp, joins us to discuss the political fallout from the chaos. First, I want to talk about my friends at My Digital Money. Everybody wants to invest in crypto these days, Bitcoin, Ethereum, so many digital currencies out there, but it's not easy to get started. That's where My Digital Money comes in. It's an easy-to-use, self-traded crypto IRA platform with concierge-level customer service. It's one of the few U.S.-based cryptocurrency companies that will answer your phone call and help you get started. Because your comfort and security is their absolute top priority, they offer an unparalleled military-grade security for your coins, trigger orders to help you secure opportunities for gains or limit losses without having to watch your account 24/7, a play money account so you can test the market, and this could be a great time, honestly, to get into this exciting technology-based investment. When it comes to your money, you deserve a team of dedicated professionals. Check them out at mydigitalmoney.com. Again, that's mydigitalmoney.com. We'll be right back with more. Hold the line. With the way the Biden administration has handled the madness in Afghanistan, the horrifying images seem to have registered with their voters. Since the evacuation, Biden's approval rating has tanked. 62% of Americans disagree with the administration's evacuation of our troops in Afghanistan, bringing his overall approval rating to 41%. Will the chaos in Afghanistan become costly to the Democrats in the upcoming, still a year out, but upcoming 2022 midterm elections? Mercedes Schlapp, senior fellow of the American Conservative Union, joins us now to discuss. Mercedes, always good to see you.
Great to see you too, Buck.
I got to say, I thought the Biden administration was going to be a huge disappointment to anyone who was on the fence and decided, oh, I'll give good old Joe a shot in the last election. I didn't know that it would go into a catastrophic tailspin and look like it's about to fly the plane into the side of the mountain, so to speak. What are you making of all this?
Yeah, that happened pretty quickly. I got some calls today of people saying, can we put bumper stickers together that say, don't blame me, I voted for Trump? Which, Buck, I think that's very interesting because in the swamp, I can tell you, there's a lot of Trump people that stayed very quiet during the election while all their neighbors were very happy putting up Biden signs. Now you see the Biden supporters being awfully quiet, if you ask me. But quite frankly, what we're seeing is not only a foreign policy catastrophe, but a political catastrophe that I believe Joe Biden will not be able to recover from.
It's not just Afghanistan. Americans are losing faith in Biden on a lot of issues like the economy and COVID-19. This is from a CNN piece. Biden's decline to the withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan is tied to that. But as the data shows, Biden has been trending downward for a while. He is losing ground on a number of issues. His ratings on the coronavirus and the economy has been punctuated by how Americans see him handling the troop withdrawal in Afghanistan. It looks like, Mercedes, at this point, the bigger question isn't, or the more important question isn't, where is Biden failing, but where isn't he on a major policy issue so far?
Yeah, I got to tell you, when you're starting to see the indicators, for example, on the economy, where the inflation is up to about 3.6%, some of our economist friends have said that that could go up to 7% by next year. I mean, that really hurts the middle class that works, that hurts the blue collar workers. So that I think will have a big impact going into next year. We're also seeing and continue to see the chaos on the border. I know that the mainstream media doesn't want to cover it, but when you have over 200,000 people crossing the border, being apprehended in just 1 month, and you've reached that 1 million person mark by now since the beginning of this year, Buck, it's troubling. I mean, so you've got the chaos at the border, you've got the chaos with the economy, you've got the uncertainty with the pandemic and this idea of a vaccine mandate and a mask mandate, something that I think you love so much, right, Buck?
You know, I hate those masks.
I know. And then you've got the fact of Afghanistan, an area that was, for the most part, under control, under Afghan rule. And then all of a sudden, you've got Biden surrendering to a terrorist group, leaving behind billions of dollars of our military equipment and intelligence records. That is just troubling. And I think that it's really having Americans think twice about those that voted for Biden saying, what did I just do? I just handed over our national security and our homeland security over to this man who really is unfit to be president.
What are your expectations for, as somebody who understands political narrative very well, Mercedes, for the Biden administration once this self-imposed deadline of tomorrow, it's really, I guess, imposed by the Taliban and Biden is accepting it, once that comes and goes and we reach the point where we don't have U.S. military presence in Afghanistan anymore, how far out do you think we are from the Biden team saying it wasn't perfect, but it was a bold move that Biden pulled in the summer of 2021?
Well, when you had the national security advisor saying that we're going to review and take a look at how we did the evacuation process, not criticizing their own actions, but just reviewing it to just see what they could have possibly done better, it's just so concerning because it just shows how unprepared our military was, how unprepared the administration was to deal with the downfall that we saw of the Afghan government. And quite frankly, they abandoned the Afghan forces. Look, there was no question that there should have been a moment in time to be able to move out our troops in a methodical way, in a way that would not put our troops in harm's way, not put those pro-Afghan people who support America, pro-America Afghan people in harm's way either. I was talking to an Afghan interpreter who told me that his friends who were left behind in Afghanistan, they received a note from the Taliban. And the note said, either you surrender or you will be executed. I got to tell you, that alone is so disturbing, especially when you find out that these Afghan interpreters, many of them stood side by side with our American troops. This one Afghan interpreter, he became an interpreter at the age of 16. Now he's well into his 30s. He loves America. He believes that this has been the biggest mistake made to just cut and run from Afghanistan and hand over the government to a brutal authoritarian regime that is abusive of women and young girls and who will stay focused on executing more of these pro-American Afghans who were left behind.
Mercedes, do you think that the Biden administration is already in a place where they're concerned about how the midterms are going to look, or is a year's time enough for the Democrat corporate media and the various allies that Biden and the DNC can count on to rewrite a bit of history and change our focus to, I don't know, the insurrection maybe?
Well, this is why it becomes so interesting, right? When you're talking about that you have this chaos in Afghanistan, the chaos at the border. What's Nancy Pelosi doing? She's focused on trying to pass H.R. 4, which we know would impact our election system. I mean, their goal at the end of the day for the Democrats is to federalize our election systems. It's to allow for ballot harvesting, to continue to allow for mail-in ballots, to take away state control of our election process. So we cannot be asleep at the wheel. We know that Nancy Pelosi is going to try to push this through. Hopefully it will die in the Senate. But this is where we have to keep a watchful eye, because that is the goal of the Democrats, and we can't lose sight of that.
Mercedes, always appreciate you being with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Buck.
With less than 24 hours before the deadline for American withdrawal, thousands of Americans and our allies remain on the ground in Afghanistan. After the break, we'll talk to the founder of Mighty Oaks Foundation, Chad Robichaux, who's on the ground in the region helping with the evacuation. But let me tell you about my friends at Black Rifle Coffee. If you're like me, you have to start your day with a healthy dose of caffeine. And that means kicking off my morning with Black Rifle Coffee. I mean, this is some of the best coffee you'll ever get anywhere. And it's from a veteran-owned company that serves premium coffee to people who love America. Black Rifle supports veteran law enforcement and first responder causes with every bag you buy. I absolutely drink this coffee every day. I love it. Black Rifle imports its high-quality beans from all over the world and roasts them 5 days a week in Tennessee and Utah. The team at Black Rifle is researching and experimenting with new roasting methods all the time so they can bring you the absolute best. Purchase today at blackriflecoffee.com/buck and use code BUCK at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Fuel your summer with America's coffee, Black Rifle Coffee. Chad Robichaux coming up after the break. Stay with us. As thousands attempt to flee Afghanistan amid the Taliban's takeover and their tightening grip on the country, a number of veterans are working overtime to assist Afghan allies and Americans trying to escape. Chad Robichaux, U.S. Marine Corps Force Recon veteran and founder of the Mighty Oaks Foundation, is currently on the ground in the region and has been assisting with the evacuation of our Afghan allies through the Save Our Allies organization. Chad is with us here to discuss the ongoing efforts. Chad, appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Tell us what's going on. What are people like yourself doing? What's your organization doing? And what's the status of, with 24 hours before the apparent deadline, the evacuation efforts?
Yeah, well, all evacuations have pretty much ceased from a humanitarian standpoint. Organizations like ours, I individually want to get my interpreter out that I did 8 deployments with. A guy that saved my life multiple times and saved my friends' lives, and I was committed to get him and his family out. That began my pursuit to come here, despite the SIV process failing him. And as I put a team together to do this, we realized a lot of other people needed help. We identified 3,000 orphans, and we worked with a host nation that we're in right now. That they allowed us to use their military, their planes, and their military resources. And we put together a plan, built a Joint Operations Command Center, and launched into Afghanistan. And 8 days later, we got 8,911 out, coordinated another 3,000, so about 12,000 people we got out. I want to make it known that our people were very vetted, and we had a very deliberate process in who we got out and how we got them out. So mainly SIVs, American civilians, orphans and widows or women that would be vulnerable, as well as Christian groups that would have been persecuted.
Chad, can you give me a sense of how, roughly a general idea of how many of the Afghans that have been evacuated were actually either interpreters or directly working with the U.S. military?
Yeah, I can't speak for the military and who the military took out or other organizations. That was our primary target. So we have about 1,000 SIVs out of our 9,000 that we have out, and the rest of them are primarily we have a group of American civilians. We also have a very large portion of orphans. That's one of the groups that we targeted. So most of ours will be orphans, women, and families. A lot of families of the SIVs. So when I say 1,000 SIVs, you have big families. For example, my SIV interpreter has a wife and 6 kids, and so that's mostly the groups that we have.
So now that we're still at this deadline with 24 hours left to go, is your group? What's the plan from this point going forward? Are you going to be able to get more people out? Do we know what happens after this military withdrawal deadline occurs? Just tell us what you expect the next couple of days to be like.
Yeah, well, about 48 hours ago, we were shut down both by the U.S. military, who's there, started sealing the gates, really had shut our ability down to fly in and out. In addition, we filled up our country. We were supposed to only bring 4,100 to this country we're in. We brought almost 12,000. And so that's the case with a lot of countries. They've filled up. The U.S. State Department it's not helping on the back end to get them out. So it's kind of like a backlog and jammed up to be able to get people through the system. We're committed to see the people we got out all the way through the end till they get to their new home. So we're going to continue into phase 2 of our operation, which is making sure the SIV process is followed with the State Department, making sure they are able to get to maybe some temporary nations. And so I just recently had brought a group to another nation nearby. And the only reason I'm not saying the nation's name is not because it's secret. It's because our State Department has been intervening with the process and stopping NGOs and humanitarian efforts from moving people. I'm not sure why the motivation is to do that, but they have done that several times now.
Chad, is there any hope that people who don't or have not gotten out, is there going to be effort, you think, from groups like yours to try to get them out even after the Taliban are in full control and the U.S. military presence from Kabul airport has been removed?
Yeah, we have estimated 10,000 American citizens still there on the ground. We have thousands of our allies still there. We know because they're still reaching out to us continually and asking for help. Our list we have thousands on our list of people that still want help. So we will do every possible way that we can. Now we have some plans. We have some operational plans I obviously won't discuss here. And I know several other people do. We're trying to collaborate so we're not running over each other or conflicting with each other's operations. But we do have some plans to go in and continue to help get people out. I hope the United States government will not leave our American citizens behind, but I've kind of lost hope in that at this point. And certainly they don't have any intentions of getting our allies out because they wasn't prepared for even us to get them out.
I've heard reports from people that are involved in this process like you, Chad, that even at some points there's been U.S. government bottlenecks on the ground at Kabul airport that have prevented people who should otherwise have gotten through from getting through. Have you also been told that by people?
Well, our team has experienced that. Look, to say that the United States military controls the Kabul airport is not true. The Taliban has controlled the airport since we seized it. If you control the outer perimeter of something, then you actually control that space. We've allowed the Taliban to control that outer perimeter, and the U.S. State Department has advised. By the way, the U.S. State Department, the White House gave them the NEO operation, a non-combatant evacuation operation, which belongs to the DOD. The White House took it from the military, gave it to the State Department. The State Department has treated us like an embassy and used our military as security guards, and has used the Taliban to be the outer perimeter checkpoint. So even if we've seen this, this is not theory, conspiracy, we've seen this happen. U.S. citizens make it inside the holding area of the airport. then they will be kicked out, sent back out to go in line with the Taliban because they have to show the Taliban their blue passport, and the Taliban has led them through. The Taliban is taking this from them, sending them back to where they came from, oftentimes beating them up, and who knows what happens to them. So it's a completely failed process. It's horrific that our brave men and women in uniform are there, treated like security guards and not allowed to help our American citizens under direction of the White House and the State Department, and that our American citizens who are desperate, can you imagine how scared they are? They try to make it to the airport, they get sent back to the Taliban, and the Taliban has to look at their passport.
Chad, I just got to know, are you, I mean, this is unfortunate, but we got to know, do you think there are going to be Americans that are left behind after tomorrow?
100% there will be. I mean, it's impossible to say anything otherwise. I mean, I wish that wasn't the case. Look, I come from the special operations community, and where I come from, if we have one American citizen in a foreign land or in a dangerous place, we will scorch the earth to go get them. Even if we know we're going to lose guys, we're going to go get that one American citizen, because that's what the United States military does. We protect our citizens, and we bring them home. And for this administration to agree to a deadline to leave American citizens behind is a complete malfeasance of office, disgusting. It's treasonous to me. I know we throw that word around a lot, but you don't leave Americans behind. We don't agree to a deadline. The deadline would be when we get all our people out. That's the deadline. And right now, being here and doing what we're doing is just so upsetting. It's so disturbing, and it's to see other countries, there's countries that are in the Middle East right now that care more about getting our American civilians out than I feel like our United States government does.
Chad, appreciate the work you're doing, and thanks for sharing all of your insights on this with us. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
The CDC is going woke. Not content with controlling Americans through lockdowns and mandatory masking, CDC is now trying to control what we say by publishing a language guide to promote, quote, health equity. Coming up, the First TV's Rob Smith gives his thoughts on the federal government's efforts to bring social justice to American healthcare. But right now, I want to tell you about My Digital Money. The crypto market's heating up, and everyone wants to get in on the action, but it's not easy to get started. That's why Colin Plume, the CEO of Noble Gold, decided to create My Digital Money. It's an easy-to-use, self-trading crypto IRA platform with concierge-level customer service. It's one of the few U.S.-based cryptocurrency companies that'll answer your phone call and help you get started. Because your comfort and security is their absolute top priority, they offer an unparalleled military-grade security for your coins, trigger orders to help you secure opportunities for gains or limit losses without having to watch your account 24/7, a play money account so you can test the market without risking your money, and with the recent pullback of most of the major cryptocurrencies, this might be the best time in a long time to get into this exciting technology-based investment. When it comes to your money, you deserve a team of dedicated professionals who have your back and speak to you honestly. Check them out at mydigitalmoney.com. That's mydigitalmoney.com. And we'll be right back with the First TV's Rob Smith. The CDC goes woke. In an attempt to, quote, eliminate dehumanizing language, the agency published a new language guide to promote health equity and inclusive communication. The guide discourages using terms like alcoholic, smoker, uninsured, elderly, inmate, homeless, poor, disabled, homosexual, illegal immigrant. Yeah, a lot of things. But the CDC, under a major microscope these days, see what we did there, for the past year and a half, it's only a matter of time before they bent the knee to satisfy woke, science-defying demands. So, what's next and what do we make of this? Here to react, Rob Smith, host of Rob Smith is Problematic. Rob, always good to have you, my man.
Always good to be here, Buck.
So the CDC is a massive federal bureaucracy, and I think it's important for people to know that these federal bureaucracies are just like corporate boardrooms now, full of woke jargon and ideology. The preferred terms, to give some, they actually give you a chart here, Rob. Instead of inmate, say people or persons who are incarcerated. Instead of alcoholic, person with substance abuse disorder. Instead of a smoker, a person or people who smoke. I mean, your tax dollars at work here, Rob. What the heck?
Yeah, this is absolutely ridiculous. And I think this is very indicative of how, we talk about this a lot because we're about 10, 15 years into this huge social media revolution. So everything that started in Twitter, everything that started in sociology one-on-one classes and college campuses, this has all made its way to some of the biggest organizations in our society. This is the Centers for Disease Control, right? This is the CDC. And they're saying that you have to use nicer language when we're talking about smokers. We have to use a nicer language when we're talking about people that have alcohol addiction issues, probably people that have obesity. So these are the issues that the CDC exists to try to combat, and we have to speak plainly about these issues if we really want to combat them. But now they are bowing to the Marxists and the woke mob of Twitter to sort of change the language. To me, it is very infuriating, and it's also very sinister in a way, because like I said, Buck, when these people can control your language, when they control what you call things, when they control the way in which you speak, they can control everything. So we have a CDC that is completely controlled by woke leftists that came out of Twitter. It's actually unbelievable.
I mean, some of these too, Rob, it's amazing that they clearly feel like there's some kind of a benefit just from the performative act of trying to seem highly sensitive. I mean, you can't call someone homeless. You have to say it's a person experiencing homelessness. I mean, no rational adult could say that out loud and say that this is a worthwhile expenditure of time and taxpayer dollars, or forget about even the taxpayer, just anyone's time, energy, effort, and money here. But I do think it goes to a broader level of what you're bringing up, which is that indoctrination, ideological indoctrination to be woke leftists is now infiltrating and all over the federal bureaucracy.
Yeah, it really has. And the thing that is the most off-putting about this whole thing is that the CDC, this is yet another organization that people used to trust, right? People are not going to trust them with this woke left language. And God knows that after the coronavirus pandemic and dealing with all of this stuff, the people's trust of these institutions are less and less. But how are we going to combat these things? How are we going to combat things like obesity? How are we going to combat things like homelessness? How are we going to combat all of these things that these federal bureaucracies are supposed to combat if we cannot even speak of them plainly? Oh, we can't fight obesity because, we can't call it obesity. We have to call it people experiencing obesity, or we can't fight homelessness. We have to watch our language before we get real about that stuff. And a lot of the issues that are going on in society right now, and you and I talk about this a lot, is because people cannot speak plainly and openly about these issues. But for the far left ideologues that now control the CDC, for the woke Twitter mafia that pushes their language orthodoxy on everything, this is what they want, because they want to control the language. They don't necessarily want to fix these issues. It is ridiculous. It is a waste of taxpayer dollars. I honestly can't even believe we're talking about it, but this is just where we are right now. And let me make one more point.
Sure.
This stuff is not going to end once we get the senile buffoon that's in office right now out. This stuff is going to become, in the words of the left, systemic. So we're going to be dealing with this stuff and these changes that are being made right now for decades to come. It's unbelievable.
And Robin, I mentioned that this is all over the federal bureaucracy, all over the federal government. We were just talking about the CDC and their word guide a second ago. The DOJ has hired its first ever Chief Diversity Officer. Chief Diversity Officer, according to a statement put out, will join the Deputy Assistant Attorney General to lead and coordinate the department's diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. The advertised salary for this job makes up to $172,000 a year. I mean, Rob, this to me, it's like in the Soviet Union when they had political commissars who were in every unit of the military, every major factory, every government body. A person whose job was just to walk around and make sure that you only thought and said the approved things by the party. That's from the perspective of a leftist, what it seems to me the Chief Diversity Officer at DOJ is going to be doing.
But, it's not even that. Okay, so I believe that, if we're having different, people in different roles, I think that you should get the best person for the job. People want diversity, inclusion. Like, I understand all of that. But with a position like this, it's for nothing else but the Biden administration, all these people to trot whoever this person is out to be on panels, to go on cable news, to do all of this stuff, and to get paid, to the tune of $172,000 a year. That is going to come from taxpayer money. So these positions, these sort of diversity officers, They exist in pretty much every aspect of society. All the mainstream corporations, Madison Avenue, advertising agencies, etc. These people generally do nothing. They are just people that are trotted out to be on panels, to be the public face of quote unquote diversity for the organization, while the organization does absolutely nothing. And furthermore, this is not even about diversity or inclusion or any of these other buzzwords. This is about them finding people who adhere to their particular ideology. And they want to fill all of these government organizations with people that are sort of very loyal to that ideology. And like I said again, if we get this senile buffoon out of office in 3.5 years, whoever comes in, I hope to God it is a Republican, whether it's Trump, DeSantis, whoever, fire every single one of these people that was appointed during the Biden administration, because God knows when the Biden administration came in, they fired everybody that was appointed by Trump.
Rob, always good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
All right, thanks, bud.
Coming up, the Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel who was relieved of his command after slamming his bosses over the botched Afghanistan withdrawal announces his resignation. We'll have more on how the military, it seems, let him down in tonight's Quick Hits. But how much equity do you have in your home? 50,000, 100,000, more? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners the more equity you have, the greater the chance foreign and domestic criminals will come after you. Home title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes out there. In fact, Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is alerting homeowners they could already be a victim and not know it. Here's how it goes down. First, cyber thieves search hundreds of public databases for high equity homes. Next, they pull your home's online title, forge your signature stating you sold your home, and take out loans using your equity. You're not covered by insurance, your bank, or common identity theft programs. Protect your most valuable asset. Register your address now to see if you're already a victim and receive a complete title history of your home, a $100 value, free. Go to HomeTitleLock.com. Again, that's HomeTitleLock.com. We have Quick Hits coming up next. In tonight's Quick Hits, we'll honor the 13 U.S. service members who were killed in Afghanistan last week. Before we get into that, let's take a look at some other stories. Remember that Marine who called for accountability from top-level military commanders? This gentleman right here, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller. Well, this is the latest update we've got for you on it. He has resigned after he was relieved of duty. A Marine Corps officer who was relieved of his command for chastising his bosses over the botched Afghan withdrawal has decided to call it quits, the New York Post story goes. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller, who came under fire after a Facebook post last week, said on YouTube Sunday that he's sticking by his guns, resigning his commission, walking away from a $2 million pension after 17 years of military service. It's a man who clearly has the courage of his convictions. He broke with military rules and regulations, but it seems that only sometimes are those really enforced against individuals. Bill de Blasio, still the mayor of New York City, and he is an awful person and a terrible mayor, and there's nothing that you would say about this guy generally that would be anything other than deeply critical if you were being honest. But he did have just kind of a moment today where people say, wow, Bill de Blasio, here he is with a turban on at a meeting of, I believe, Sikhs in Queens. You see, this got elected. It's just, basically, we're just taking this as an excuse to show you this photo of Bill de Blasio being Bill de Blasio. I don't know what else to say other than that. So there you go. I mean, the worst mayor in New York, but people, you know, we're stuck with him for another year. Biden, as you know, there's a terrible hurricane that's hit Louisiana in the last 24 hours, Hurricane Ida. Joe Biden is trying to project some sense of command, trying to be out there, making it seem like he's in control and we don't have essentially an empty suit or a declining dementia patient, the kind of things that people say about Biden. He's fighting against that notion and certainly that imagery. But here, he was at a Hurricane Ida meeting, and not only does he sound lost, but he called Cedric Richmond, well, you can hear it yourself.
And thanks for joining me. I'm here the FEMA director is on. FEMA Director Chris Wells, she's on, and I'm here with my senior advisor and boy who knows Louisiana very, very well, man, and New Orleans, and Cedric Richmond.
Yeah. Joe Biden, the guy who's at the top of the federal government, most powerful man in the world, really, and at least maybe the people around him now, you could say. His advisors and the people that are really calling the shots, they perhaps are more accurately described as a collection of the most powerful people, because it feels like these days no one really believes Joe Biden is actually the guy who's making the big calls. That's what it feels like right now. Anyway, on to something more important and something that is sacred, and that is paying our respects and showing all due fealty and a sense of just a sense of thanks for the tremendous sacrifice made by 13 U.S. service members who were killed in Kabul last week. Here we wanted to show you who they were. These are the soldiers, men and women who gave their lives. Maxton Soviak, 22. This is top row across. You see there, Maxton Soviak, Kareem Nikawi, 20 Marines, David Lee Espinoza, 20 Marines, Ryan McCollum, 20 Marines, Jared Schmitz, 20 Marines. In the bottom row, Hunter Lopez, 22 Marines, Dagan Page, 23 Marines, Darren Taylor Hoover Jr., 31 Marines, Johanny Rosario Pichardo, 25 Marines, Humberto Sanchez, 22 Marines. And then we have one more, Nicole Gee, 23 Marines, Dylan Marola, 20 Marines, and Ryan Naus, 23 Army. All gave their lives for you, for me, for this country. Remember that. That's it for tonight's Hold the Line. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly is up next. Field's High.